recent study by the RAND Corporation found that from 2010 to 2013, the number of jihadist groups worldwide grew 58%. That number, the number of jihadist fighters, doubled to a high estimate of over 100,000. The number of attacks by al-Qaeda affiliates increased from 390 to 1,000 attacks. Al-Qaeda remains a central part of this fight. Despite the death of Osama bin Laden, the group operates in more territory and has more safe havens than it did just 5 or 10 years ago. On this map to my right shows the global threat of al-Qaeda, the red being al-Qaeda and the blue being other terrorist groups, the territory generally that they control in the regions. Some estimates, well, in Syria, al-Qaeda affiliates have grown by huge numbers, with jihadists from all over the world coming to fight. It now appears that on the government side there are about 3,000 so-called terrorists, and on the so-called rebel side there are about 8,000 fighters. Some estimates put the number of foreign jihadists who have traveled to Syria up to 11,000. These fighters may return home to wreak havoc both in the United States and other Western countries. In Iraq, ISIL seems to take over more cities and towns by the day, carving out a terrorist mini-state in the middle of the chaos. Al-Qaeda affiliates in Yemen and Somalia remain focused on U.S. interests. Some say AQAP is the strongest of all the affiliates. Boko Haram is on the rise in Nigeria, seen through the recent kidnappings and mass slaughter of innocent civilians that the world knows about. Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan remains determined to make a comeback despite the erosion of the so-called Al-Qaeda core. The 5 senior Taliban leaders that we just exchanged for Sergeant Bergdahl will not make Afghanistan a nicer place to live. This subcommittee has explored these issues in great detail over the last 18 months, and it seems to me the situation is getting worse, not better. The facts suggest that the fight against al-Qaeda and their affiliates has gotten worse as well. I added 2 amendments to the Defense and Intelligence authorizations this year on this issue. The Director of the National Intelligence must report back to Congress with a comprehensive strategy to combat al-Qaeda and its affiliates, including detailed definitions of how the administration views these groups. The Secretary of Defense is also required to contract out an independent assessment of U.S. government's efforts to combat al-Qaeda and their affiliates. This was necessary because the administration's rhetoric on al-Qaeda has been all over the map, literally, ranging from nearly defeated to a growing threat. GAO will also be taking a much closer look at the CT Bureau itself. I look forward to reading its findings sooner than later. Today we'll hear from Ambassador Tina Kadenow, the new coordinator for counterterrorism in the U.S. Department of State. The administration says counterterrorism is one of the top foreign policy goals. If that's true, then it does not make much sense to me that it left the coordinator position vacant for over a year. But now we have an ambassador, and I'm glad to see that that position is filled. The mission of the State Department Counterterrorism Bureau is to develop coordinated strategies to defeat terrorists abroad and secure the cooperation of international partners. It's an important mission, but it's not clear to me that the Bureau and what it's doing are accomplishing. That is because very few of its resources are being spent on evaluating taxpayer dollars. Just 3 outside evaluations have been done since GAO first pointed out the need for evaluations to then the Office of Counterterrorism in 2008. The Bureau has yet to complete a single impact evaluation, the most rigorous evaluations that truly measure whether or not money is making any difference. It's not clear why it took the office so long to get those 3 evaluations, and it's not clear to why the Bureau is still underfunding evaluations, with only 1 external evaluation currently on the docket. So we're going to have plenty to talk about with our ambassador. Terrorism is an enemy that we cannot afford to ignore or underestimate. I'll now turn to the ranking member from California, Mr. Sherman, for his opening statement.